I'm sitting here with Dylan Haskins, probably one of the best known faces of the general election campaign, through some absolutely amazing stuff that they've been doing online and your videos and all the promotion that's been going on. Dylan, first question is about your age and the questions that you're getting on the doorstep about that, and really about how it is like walking around D2 and seeing your photo up everywhere. Well,
the age thing is the most commonly asked question on the door. People are quite polite about it usually. Right. Do you mind me asking how old you are? But it's fine, you know, I'm 23, but Brian Cowan and Kenny were both elected at 23, 24. The difference is they were elected into their parents' seats, is the answer that I've been giving, you know?
Right.
And because it's true, yet that I'm looking to be elected on my own merits, not because my family have been involved in politics, which they haven't. So I think that that's kind of a key distinction to make. There's certainly precedent in young politicians. I just may happen to look a bit younger than maybe I am, there's nothing you can do about that. I suppose the poster thing was really weird when they first came out, when I first saw them coming out of the van, because they're gigantic.
Yeah.
And I just saw someone lifting it out of the back of the van as I was walking around the corner, and I just went and stopped dead at the end of the street. But then it's fine, it just becomes you don't even think of it as yourself, it's just a thing, it's just part of the campaign, you know. It would be equally weird seeing your name around everywhere, but it's just like it becomes, you know, just part and parcel of what it's about, because really it's a team, so it's like the Dylan Haskins team is what you think about rather than just it being me, you know.
Yeah, and you and the team have seen the thread on Boards.ie with the questions. We've chosen some that are particularly relevant to your campaign, but if there was a way that you could summarise your campaign, what is your platform, or what are you running on? Well,
there's four key areas, which is putting society first. There's restructuring for a reliable economy, reinvigorating the city, and political reform as well is a key. The four key agendas. So what I've done is I've presented from the beginning of the campaign a policy document on my website, which outlines my analysis in each of these areas, and then presents initiatives. So I'm not an economist, but I think what we need in our financial institutions, being transparency in terms of how decisions are made, the fact that decisions are made as close to the people they affect as possible. Being the bank manager, you know, if the bank goes to get capital for a new business and the bank manager says yes and signs off on it, and head office just says no and just sends it back because that's what they're doing, I think that that's a real flaw, and we're not going to get anywhere if we can't free up capital. So there's things like that which I think are pretty much common sense, and you can apply that to how you view economics. And it's the same thing, transparency. We need it in our political decision making, we need it in financial decision making, and that runs through all of my policy areas. Okay, to go to the questions, you support free education, but what other reforms would you like in our education system to help drive the smart economy? I support, well, absolutely, but at the moment we don't have free education for starters. It's a €2,000 registration fee, on top of the other costs it sends to send someone to university. So that's a real problem. I think we need. I support the Educate Together model for primary and for secondary schools. There's plans at the moment to introduce the first secondary school run by an Educate Together group. At the moment they've published that plan, and I think that's a really positive step. And the fact that 92% of our primary schools, I think, are the Catholic Church are responsible for them, is a really unsustainable position, especially for an increasingly secular society as well. I think that's important. I think something that it hasn't really been put in place in Ireland is a comprehensive internship scheme, so that when you come out of university, at the moment there are no jobs, there's no opportunities for young people, so they're leaving. Young people aren't necessarily looking for lots of money immediately when they come out of university. They just want to see that there's a path, that there's something that they can do here, and there's a reason to stay. So I think we need, when I say a comprehensive internship scheme, what I mean is that there's a job spec for what you're doing as an intern in specific organisations, rather than at the moment people are being roped in to do crap free work, you know.
Right.
So I think it's being honest about what's entailed in the job, and doing that across the board, and asking companies to sign up to this. And I think that would be really important, because that means people are developing their skills. And I think maybe we need to look at the range of courses that we're offering in our universities. Some of them are extremely specific. I use the example of if you can do a course in music management, really I think you do the course in management and then you do an internship with a music company or so, you know, that being an example. I think the broader range of skills that people are coming out of universities with, the better. So I think that's kind of a key focus, but it comes down to practical. When we say about this, the smart economy, really, I think it's the creative city is kind of an area that I think feeds into that hugely, because companies want to locate in a city that is creative, even if they're not necessarily a big creative company. It's just a brilliant environment to be in. It's a brilliant brand to be associated with, and how we do that is we support people who are trying to start new creative projects, be they you know, young people coming out of college, or be it someone who's been unemployed. It doesn't really matter what age you are.
Okay. On your website you mentioned a creative investment fund which would be funded by donations from companies fulfilling their needs for corporate social responsibility, including many who are here primarily to save money through our tax regime. Given the climate and how companies come here simply to save money, isn't that a tad unrealistic? And how much do you think could be raised through targeting these corporations for money?
Well, I suppose we won't know how much can be raised until we go and talk to them and ask them. Unfortunately, this campaign as a whole 2.5 weeks old, so it's quite difficult to have done those negotiations while building an election campaign. But I think that the point I made in that policy is the point I mentioned earlier, actually, about capital not being available for people, especially projects that aren't as clear-cut in terms of this is going to make this much money within the first year. So what I proposed to do was to give a quarter of my salary to start this fund off. That's almost a gesture to say TDs are paid too much money and let's put this money to better use. And it's a drop in the ocean. But if the other 165 TDs did that as well, the fund I think would be a lot larger. I think while we can look at the corporate social responsibility funds of companies, we can also look at their capital that they have here. A lot of multinationals have profits that they're keeping in Ireland. They're not repatriating them because they don't want to be taxed on them. So some of those companies already are. Google have capital, Intel have capital, arms of their companies. They tend to invest in areas that are specific to their own area. But I think there's a lot of potential to go in and talk to those guys and to build some sort of a framework where that capital can maybe be used as venture capital for new Irish creative startups as well.
Okay, and how do you plan on persuading older voters to side with you, and what are your thoughts on the problems of our ageing population in the coming years?
Well, I'm not standing on youth issues. I'm happen to be a young candidate, but the concerns, the fact that young people are leaving this country en masse is a problem for everyone. For starters, for the social reason of the fact that it's someone's son or someone's daughter or grandson or daughter, but also if all the young people leave the country, there's no one here to pay the pensions for the older people, you know, so it's not sustainable for a country to have their young population leave. It hasn't been that difficult to convince older voters at all. They've been here a lot longer, and they see what experience counts for, and they see what imagination counts for, and which is more needed at this moment in time. We've seen what experience has done, or extremely experienced people have done to our country, but experience means nothing unless you've learned from your lessons. So they recognise that we definitely need a greater balance of age within the Dáil, and of diversity in general in terms of what your experience is and what you bring to that table, and that goes across. I mean, that's for gender as well. But I think we certainly need a more diverse Dáil, and older voters have recognised that more than most people actually. Yeah.
The Irish language is a big topic at the moment, especially with Fine Gael's policies on it. But what's your command of it? How is your command of it?
I wish it was better.
Okay.
I got a B in it, and did honours Irish for my leaving cert.
Right.
This year. No, I'm only talking. I did it a few years ago. But I think I can probably speak French better than I can speak Irish, and that says a lot about how it's taught, really. I enjoyed studying the old Irish poetry, but that said, I wonder would the time have been maybe better spent improving on the conversational aspect of how you use Irish.
Yep.
Because even as a child, you learn sounds and you learn to speak before you learn to read poetry. So I think get people talking the language and finding a use for it, and then and then you can learn the grammar afterwards, really. But that needs to be the focus. The idea, Fine Gael's proposal to abolish it as a compulsory, it's just a populist decision. They're I think just trying to attract younger voters, which it's backfired really, because young people do appreciate Irish. They just want it to be taught better. It also ignores the fundamental principle or the fundamental fact, rather, that Irish is the default language of our constitution. If there's any contention over the language or in the translations in the constitution between the English and Irish version, the Irish one takes precedence. So if the Irish language isn't compulsory, are we saying that it's not compulsory for a citizen to be potentially able to understand their constitution? You know, the principle of that doesn't make sense. It's not logical. So unless they wanted to change Irish from being the default language of the constitution, I think it's essential that it's compulsory.
Who was funding your campaign, and were you part of the aborted Democracy Now! Grouping?
No, I wasn't a part of that grouping. I was asked to join various alliances before it. Before this campaign, and I was asked to attend a meeting for that particular group. But I thought that it was really important to stand on my own. Excuse me. I thought it was really important to stand on my own platform, and because I can only really stand by what I say and what I believe, and I can only trust myself in an election. Especially given the short run into this election, you know, there's not enough time to work with people and understand if you can actually reach a consensus with these people on decision making. Also, I think it's more productive probably to see who actually gets elected, and then we can form our alliances, rather than forming alliances for an idea in advance. I think ideas are in the air, and people can see that. They can see what independent in their own constituency is representing these broader values and these broader aspirations of political reform, and whether it's an independent standing on local issues or on national issues, and I'm certainly the latter. And I think there's a lot of other independents that are. And if you just look at what the manifestos are of each of those independents, you can see that there's a common agenda there, and that can easily be built upon when we're elected.
And regarding funding your campaign?
The public. Since week one, I've published all of my income and all of my expenditure for the campaign, from €1 to €1,000 being the highest donation I've received. I'm not legally required to do so. I'm not even legally required to disclose a large amount of those donations under the current regulations, but I thought, why not do it, you know? This is what I can achieve as an independent in the Dáil. I can raise the standard of what people can expect from a TD. And that means that if I'm doing that, other candidates aren't doing that. And that allows people to say, well, why aren't you doing that? You know, and we've seen, even in my own constituency, we've seen the spend on the amount of posters around the constituency, Fine Gael in particular. There seems to be new posters going up every day, and there's billboards, but them and Labour have billboards up, and it's, you know, where is this money coming from? If you're talking about banning corporate donations, are you just going to wait until after the election when you've spent all the corporate donations that you got in the past 10 years, which you won't be getting in the next 5 years because there is no corporate donations going around? You know, that seems to be serving their own interests, really. I think, you know, say it, here's where the money's coming from. And I think that sets a standard for transparency, really.